Could Brian Schottenheimer really be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys? We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly after you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And Landon, while our colleagues are getting ready for an NFC Championship game performance on Sunday, we are breaking down whether or not Brian Schottenheimer could actually be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. What was your first reaction when you heard this news?
Pain. Pain was my first reaction. Simply because, look, this was a terrible weekend for Cowboys fans. Just to sit and have to watch this. I expected to wake up Monday morning with some kind of Cowboys news, whether it be like a coaching a search announcement or something to redirect eyeballs back to the Cowboys, as Jerry saw the same thing we saw on Sunday. I certainly didn't expect it to be this. Look, I mean, Brian Schottenheimer wasn't. They didn't let Brian Schottenheimer call plays on this team last year. McCarthy had Schottenheimer here as an offensive coordinator, as an organizing principle, basically alone, right? It's interesting to me that Schottenheimer, frankly, was even kind of considered as a guy to come back. Not that I thought that he did a specifically terrible job or anything, but he did about as much. As little as the job of offensive coordinator as an offensive coordinator could do, right? Yeah. Like Mike McCarthy's calling the plays. Mike McCarthy's the one who's in charge. Essentially, you're just kind of facilitating the offensive side of practice next to Mike McCarthy as the offensive coordinator. So for him to kind of, go into this situation as like a potential leading candidate as a head coach, he's never been a head coach before. There's almost nothing about this situation that makes me confident that he's going to be a head coach. That doesn't mean he won't be, but to me, when this became an announcement, I think the first thing that I asked when you were the one who broke the news to me, honestly, I think the first thing I asked was for head coach. He's a candidate for head coach of the Cowboys. It's a promotion for him to be the offensive coordinator who calls plays at this point. So for him to be a head coach, that's quite a leap for someone who I don't feel like is necessarily, earned that promotion.
Well, here's the way I think. I don't. Schottenheimer would not be my pick for the Dallas Cowboys head coaching spot. However, we've seen plenty of other coaches get hired that are less qualified than Schottenheimer. Schottenheimer's been an offensive coordinator in the NFL for 15 years now. It's been a long time, and he is personable. He's worked with some really good quarterbacks, and he's had some good offense. Go look at some of the last elite years of Russell Wilson came with Schottenheimer running the offense. So I don't think he is wholly unqualified for this job, just to be clear.
I think that's the issue, though, right? Is that the measuring stick that we're measuring is he qualified to be a head coach? What a terribly low bar for your head coach. That's the 100%. Problem, is that we let Mike McCarthy kind of walk out the door because he wasn't good enough of a head coach to get us to the divisional round. And now that we're searching for head coaches, I've heard the same thing with Jason Witten and Deion Sanders. People have said different things. It seems to be that the bar is just, hey, are you qualified enough to be a head coach in the NFL? What a pathetic bar to be searching again while your division mates are going into the conference championship game this coming weekend.
And I don't disagree with any of that. And it makes you really think back to last week, because it sure seemed like the Cowboys wanted Mike McCarthy back, right? They blocked the Bears' request to interview him. It seemed like Jerry Jones and McCarthy were going to sit down and get a deal hammered out. It didn't happen. And now you've seen this search with a bunch of different different coaches mentioned as options. I just don't get how, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, how your top options are Kellen Moore, Brian Schottenheimer, Robert Saleh, like Leslie Frazier. Like, how are those your best options to replace Mike McCarthy?
Well, again, I think that the real problem we're having with this whole situation is that more so than any other, head coaching search for any other team, I think there's a lot of smoke here. Like it's hard to discern what's real. There was so much talk over Deion Sanders becoming the head coach of this team last week, and he never got an official interview. So I think at this point, like, we should kind of tap the brakes on the inevitability of some of these candidates when they pop up. I'm not saying that Brian Schottenheimer isn't a real candidate, but I also think that we kind of get into these situations where, because of the full court press of the media, we assume that because we hear a new name, that's the name, right? That's the
Of course.
I like, let's see how this plays out a little bit. Maybe there's aspects of this that we're not aware of. Again, similar to Deion, like maybe he's got he's got some offensive defense coordinators that would surprise us that he's selling to the Joneses that we're unaware of. Or maybe this is the chum that Jerry threw into the water, because he just didn't have a better, more sexy name to throw on a Monday morning after your rivals are going to the conference championship games. I don't know, but either way, like, I think you kind of just have to take the name, examine it a little bit for what it's worth, and then put it back in the list of names until we hear something a little bit more official from the Cowboys.
One of the things that I don't understand is that I'm not saying that Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are going to be incredible Super Bowl winning head coaches. I'm not saying that. But we haven't heard anything about those guys potentially being even requested to be interviewed for this job. And I think a lot of people assume that they're at least at the top of the options. And it doesn't seem like the Cowboys are all that interested. Brian Flores is another one who a lot of people are interviewing, and the Cowboys just don't seem like they have a lot of interest there. That's what's so perplexing to me, is like, why haven't we heard at least the Cowboys trying to sit down with those guys to interview them?
I wouldn't be shocked if Aaron Glenn's a name that we don't start hearing more that they got eliminated, simply because there is history there. And I think we have heard the rumblings about Aaron Glenn is a name that has, history with Dallas and that sort of thing, all the reasons that you and I have mentioned before. So I wouldn't be shocked if Aaron Glenn's name comes up. I think Ben Johnson's made it pretty clear that he's not coming to coach the Cowboys. And for better or for worse, he's asking for a very specific situation that the Cowboys aren't going to provide for him.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think until I see this, like, head coaching search actually take any steps other than just one interview for a couple different folks, like, it's hard for me to feel like they're winding this process down at this point. It feels like, if anything, they're still adding names to the potential hiring list.
Well, and I think it just depends on who you're listening to, because I know, I think it was the Star Telegrams, or the Dallas Morning News, that said, don't expect this to be wrapped up until mid-February. And then there's other sources, including 105.3 The Fan, that believe that this thing could get done this week. So I have no idea what to expect. And frankly, maybe they don't either. Maybe there's a lot of different voices in Jerry Jones's ear trying to help him find the next head coach that they don't even know which direction they're leaning yet.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe they're just still trying to figure this out. It doesn't feel like they're, imminently picking somebody. At least they're not rushing the process, it feels like.
No, it doesn't. I'm sure we'll get more news over the next week or so. But I want to have a little debate on Kellen Moore versus Brian Schottenheimer as the Cowboys' next head coach. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. And that is where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing so many hats right now, and you know that every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they want to connect you with the best candidates using data that you can't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high quality candidates. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final 2 weeks of football action, and that's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It is the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex place to boost your payout or just want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On Cowboy listeners. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are still talking about the Cowboys head coaching vacancy. And it seems like the two names that we've been getting a lot of rumblings right now is Kellen Moore and Brian Schottenheimer. Of those two options, which one do you like the best?
Without a doubt, Kellen Moore. I mean, I think to me, Kellen Moore has had a kind of steady progression from being an offensive coordinator, had an okay year with the Chargers, had a very good year with the Eagles. And I even think going back and watching that Eagles game, look, I mean, you can say what you want about Jalen Hurts. I think he's, as a overall package, is a net positive for the Eagles. He certainly does things that other quarterbacks don't really have the ability to do. He has a very unique skill set, but I think it's probably difficult to call plays for him at times. He's limited as a passer. He doesn't handle pressure well. And I think that what the Eagles have been able to kind of cobble together in a passing attack has been in part large to what Kellen Moore has been able to design up, because really, especially against on Sunday, it didn't seem like they could throw the ball at all unless it was an unconventional passing down. Anytime it was like third and long, Jalen was walking into sacks. So I think for me, I've seen a progression there with Kellen Moore. I see a guy that has, made his way from quarterback coach to offensive play caller to offensive coordinator to being on the verge of being a head coach right now. And for Schottenheimer, I think Schottenheimer is a good coach. I wouldn't have any problem with having Schottenheimer back as my coach. I don't know that I necessarily would fight you too much about having Brian Schottenheimer as my play caller next year as an offensive coordinator. I think the issue I have is that I just don't think that he's necessarily had enough positive experiences as an offensive coordinator to certainly leapfrog some of the other candidates. I think Schottenheimer also would probably be a good head coach someday. I think he's a good coach. I think, guys who have grown up around it for a long time, they just have the right temperament. Obviously he's a lot like his dad, who was famously a very good, very personable, very well-loved coach. And I think that those are all important things, but I just don't know that any of that experience is enough to make me think that he's going to be enough of a head coach to kind of break through. I think with Kellen Moore, I can at least convince myself that, hey, there's something there with Kellen. He's different. He's special. He's really, really smart. He has incredible plans. I think I can kind of convince myself that maybe he could find a way to kind of break through, where is with Schottenheimer, it's like that really just feels like Mike McCarthy light at that point. And that's where I kind of push back.
Weight wise or like coaching ability wise?
Yeah, a little both, right? I mean, I don't know, it's tough.
So here's the thing I struggle with Kellen is that we saw Kellen's game plans in a couple of these playoff games, whether it was like 2021 against the 49ers, and it started out really, really slow, or 2022 against the 49ers, where they could do nothing on offense in that game. And then you look at the Eagles this year. They have two awesome receivers. They have one of the highest paid tight ends in the league. They've got one of the highest paid running backs in the league, and maybe the league's best offensive line. And they still get off to really slow starts. And I understand there's a lot of concerns about Jalen Hurts right now, but I also don't love that Jalen Hurts is playing probably the worst football of his career under Kellen. Now, is that only Kellen's fault? Probably not. I think Hurts is just he's limited now because of some injuries, and he's just not the rushing threat that he used to be. I just wonder, like, he's in almost a perfect situation now. And I know they're going to the NFC Championship game, but man, there's so many times you watch the Eagles this year and their offense just feels clunky. I don't know what it is about Kellen, but it just doesn't get me all that excited.
I mean, I think the Eagles offense looked pretty clunky last year too, and I think that it's a Jalen Hurts thing to me. Again, like, we don't need to get into this. Isn't Locked On Eagles. We don't need to get all into this, but I do think that there is certainly something to the criticism for Kellen Moore, and I look. I've made a lot of the same criticism with Kellen Moore in the play calling offense. I would do the same for Brian Schottenheimer, but guess what, guys? Brian Schottenheimer isn't calling the plays and hasn't been calling the plays for a long time, so I don't even have the option to kind of similarly criticize him here. Okay, and frankly, in comparison to that, like, he has been involved in some of these Mike McCarthy offenses, which, I mean, as clunky as the Cowboys looked at certain points with Kellen Moore calling the plays, I would say that the beginning of this offense was about as clunky as this offense has looked in 5 or 6 years. So I don't know, man. Like, maybe that's the problem that we're having, is that neither one of these are fantastic options.
No,
for the Cowboys.
I think you and I, after the playoff loss last year, we wanted something different, right? Like, we thought this team has reached the ceiling that they could reach under Mike McCarthy. It's time for something different. And if Brian Schottenheimer is your head coach, or you bring back Kellen Moore to be your head coach, it doesn't feel different. It feels like more of the same. And you and I were joking a couple days ago, like, if they would have just fired Mike McCarthy, back in 2022 or whatever, after you lost to the 49ers, you could have kept Dan Quinn and kept Kellen Moore. Maybe you'd be better off. I just don't see how. I have a hard time envisioning how you're going to be better off than you have been over the last 5 years, when more than likely you're probably going to be worse off.
I'm going to keep hammering this home because I think it matters. Like, how are we getting better? How are you breaking through? That's what we're supposed to be doing here. And the top two, guys that you're talking about are the last two offensive coordinators this team has had. Like, it's just more of the same. Like, there's a constant thread through this team that goes all the way back to Wade Phillips, right? Wade Phillips to Jason Garrett to Kellen, Kellen Moore, Kellen Moore, to transfer it over to Mike McCarthy, to Mike McCarthy to Schottenheimer. So it's like it just needs to be broken. And that's the other thing too, is I think unfortunately part of what's going on here is and I love Dak, but I think that they're giving too much deference to just what Dak wants. They feel like they have that invested. I think the point of this is supposed to be breaking the cycle of what Dak has had and trying something new so that you can break through. So maybe going to someone who Dak is familiar with is not the play here. It's not the way that you should be handling this, that you should be heading off in a new direction a little bit, taking a risk and to try to find a way to break through the way that these other teams in the division seem to have.
We're going to talk about the divisional round of the playoffs in a second, but here's my fear. I worry that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, if they watch the divisional round this weekend, and they're going to watch the championship round thinking, hey, we had Dan Quinn. Hey, we had Kellen Moore. We beat Washington once this year. Should have beat them twice. One of the games with Trey Lance. We beat Philadelphia last year. Let's just keep the status quo, keep hanging around the rim, and maybe that'll be us next year. When it feels, again, and maybe that's the case, but it feels like they need something different and they need some kind of change in order to get past this loop of 11, 12 wins, win maybe one playoff game, and they get bounced in round two.
Last thing I'll say, that implies that you can be the same year to year, that you can just hang on. That's just not what happens in the world, in life, in football. Everything is in a constant state of change. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse, right?
Yep.
And here's an example, right? You've lost the head coach for those teams those last few years. Now you're hiring their last two assistants to see if they're going to be your head coach. Yep. It's time to break something off, build something new, and grow from there.
I want to talk more about the divisional round. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That is $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and there are a variety of bets that keep every single game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for your winnings. And whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some more excitement to this awful NFC East championship game, or whatever you want to call it, FanDuel lets you keep the excitement going, and they've got you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, you and I watched football all weekend. Any big takeaways coming out of the divisional round of the NFL playoffs?
Yeah, I got to remember to start scheduling more sessions with my therapist after watching all that. Yeah, I mean, let's first off, can we just react as Cowboys fans real quick? That was incredibly depressing to watch.
Yeah, this sucks.
It really, I mean, it just sucks to watch. It's awful. My wife kept on coming in and checking on me, and rightfully so. My daughter kept on tiptoeing past the living room as I was watching the games. Not that I was gonna scream or yell at her, but just more like she didn't want to set me off into a crying mess on the floor. It was tough to watch simply because it felt like both teams had opportunities to beat our NFC East brethren. I think the Eagles game was the more depressing one to watch to me, right? Because I did really feel like there were points in which that was gonna go, the other way. It felt like that Washington game, Detroit straight up got cursed out of the like. Honestly, watching the Detroit game was felt like watching the Cowboys game.
Yeah, 100%. I thought the exact same thing.
That's literally exactly what it felt like. It felt like, oh no, absolute doom from the beginning. Like the team that was the higher ranked team was absolutely cursed at home. The fans sitting in the stadium just absolutely shocked. There's something beautifully ironic, I think, about the fact that happened to Detroit, considering everything that they, kind of did to us this year and some of the stuff I heard from Detroit fans. So there's something about that, but the Eagles won. I don't think they deserved to necessarily win that game. They got every opportunity to go their way, including the weather to go their way. It felt like, and I just felt like that was really the more depressing of the two situations.
Well, I had a couple of different thoughts as I was sitting and watching the Ravens Bills game on Sunday night. I was thinking about the five quarterbacks that were left in the tournament because that game had not gotten over yet, and it was Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, who had double-digit rushing touchdowns this year, Jalen Hurts, who had double-digit rushing touchdowns this year, Jane Daniels, who is an unbelievable athlete, and Patrick Mahomes, who consistently makes plays with his legs. And I was thinking about our guy Dak, and it's like, Dak is coming off a major hamstring injury. He already has not. We've seen his running ability diminish greatly over the last couple of years. Mike McCarthy was pretty adamant that he didn't want him to run because he wanted to keep him healthy. And I think it's like, as much as we love Dak, I do wonder, a lot more on this offense is going to have to go right in order for you to kind of get back to that level, because you don't have the added element of his legs. That's right. And the other part of this is first of all, do you think Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones are watching these divisional round games, or do you think they're just checking the box scores?
I think they watch.
Do you think they watch them?
I think at least Steven watches for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
My fear is that they're going to have the wrong takeaway when it comes to the Eagles. And they're going to look at Saquon Barkley having 200 yards and they're going to feel like, hey, we get our Saquon. We're going to be right where the Eagles are at. When you look at the Cowboys situation, they have one Pro Bowl offensive lineman now, and every other spot, not every other spot. I think BB's pretty good at center. Yeah. 3 of your other spots are up for grabs. We just don't know what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. And Philadelphia was ready for that last piece of their offense. I don't think Dallas is there yet. And if they think a single running back is going to fix all of their problems on offense, I would be concerned.
Well, listen, I mean, Mike Vrabel thinks that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, head coaches that are in the NFL have that problem, the causation versus correlation of, running back carries and winning. Like, look, I think that we've been slowly I'm not going to push back on what you're saying because you're right about what you're saying. But I will say this, that I do think that first off, that if you don't have I want to comment 2 things about what you said. One, I agree. If you don't have a running quarterback anymore, and that's the thing, right, is that I would put Dak early in his career in a kind of a tier just below where Jalen Hurts is as far as ability to use his legs. Yeah. But he wasn't like, they weren't designing a ton of, specific.
No, it's not like Lamar Jackson or anything like that.
Or even Jalen Hurts.
No.
Because Jalen too had more like designed runs. But I will say that as a weapon, there was a point when Dak could use his legs, especially I think really where we're talking about is like third downs. Like
read options and scramble out of stuff. And hey, it's 3rd and 9, and you can go get 11 with your legs, right?
With Jalen, it's like in third down situations, he doesn't see his first read. He probably is going to run the ball, right? Like that's just how he is. Dak, I think, has the ability to get through obviously a ton of different progressions in a passing down when given the ability. So I want to comment on that. In order to help Dak break through, that means that you need to provide more weapons for him than those other guys, because the secondary option for Dak isn't to take off like it is for Lamar Jackson. I mean, not that Lamar Jackson can't get through progressions or whatever, but that's just an incredible option to have.
He doesn't have that thing to rely on, right?
Having Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson type speed, is an incredible, efficient way to get, yardage when everyone's downfield covering, right? So if you don't have that, you're going to need to provide Dak some more passing options, some more people to get the ball to, because that's his superpower is instead of using his legs, he's using his mind, right? And then the running game thing, look, here's the situation. You're not wrong. Like I do think that the ownership is probably going to misread that, but that could be a net positive in some ways more than it has been in the past, because I do think there is a transition that is happening right now in the NFL as you see kind of these Fangio-based defenses with more shell coverage up front, that the way to attack that is through the running game. And it's not just like the postseason situation like it has been the previous years, where you need to pass the ball to get into the postseason, but you need to run the ball to win the postseason, right? Nowadays, you need to run the ball in the regular season because of the way defenses are playing you. So I don't think you're wrong. I do think that Jerry will likely misread that situation, but I think if they kind of invest heavily, hopefully not, drafting a running back at 12, invest heavily, but so, if they decided to go get a running back or something like that, I don't think it's such a fool's errand as it was like maybe drafting Zeke at 4.
Well, by the way, I agree with you. I think they're just in a very different situation compared to where they were when they drafted Zeke. Because you think back to 2015, I know that year was rough, but Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, and Travis Frederick all made the Pro Bowl in 2015, and they were all 25 or younger. Your worst starting offensive lineman in 2015 was a rookie Lyle Collins at left guard, who was projected to be a first-round pick that you signed as an undrafted free agent. You were plugging Zeke into maybe the best offensive line in the NFL. That's just not going to be the case for Dallas. And again, I'm not advocating that they need to go out and spend a first-round pick on the offensive line. I just think they need that unit to play better. And they need some of these guys to start to develop and get better. Maybe that helps if you go out and get a better offensive line coach. but I just don't know if they're ready for that type of investment on the offensive line, the same way that maybe the Lions were when they took Jahmyr Gibbs because they had their offensive line settled, or even Green Bay, who they had their offensive line settled and they signed Josh Jacobs in free agency. I think they're at least a year away from being able to make that move.
You add the scoops, you add the chocolate sauce, you add the whipped cream, then you add the cherry on top. You don't add the cherry on top before you finish making the rest of the sundae. That's where the Cowboys aren't. They're still in the middle of making their sundae.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Go check out the channel on YouTube or download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy the national championship game tonight, and we'll actually break it down tomorrow talking about draft prospects on Tuesday's show.